can help make I can help make reference there. Oh, and I see somebody here from Florida. I am in Tallahassee, Florida. I'm the executive director of the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. And as you're doing that, I'm going to start the program and introduce what we're doing today and how we're going to move forward. So great. We've got more folks from Florida. Great. Michigan, nice to see you. Social worker, school social worker, great. Behavioral health, electrical apprentice, very, very great. Okay, looks like we've got some case managers, development directors, welfare case managers, excellent, excellent. Client litigation advocate, great. You are with a law firm, and you will be able to get CLE credit, which is my next little bullet point here. And so great, 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 great. Okay, so we've got a wonderful group of people today. So let me start out by saying this is a program that may cover some things if you've had any training on human trafficking, but I promise you it's going to give you a different set of eyes to look at this issue. And I am honored to be doing it again with such a diverse and wonderful group of folks, and with the IEC in particular. If you're in Florida and you're required to take this as part of your Department of Business and Professional Regulation, DBPR training for lodging establishments that's mandated, this is a certified training that fits the bill on that. And also, we will be having CLE credits information at the end for those of you who are connected to lawyers or law firms, paralegals, etc. And a shout out of thanks, by the way, to our partner here in North Florida, Legal Services of North Florida, who worked with us to obtain CLE certification. So who is STAC? And because we've got folks from all over the state and all over the country, I want to just say STAC is an agency that I hope you have something similar in your community or have agencies that deal with this issue. So starting out, know that STAC is a hub agency. We provide direct assistance to sex and labor trafficking survivors. That means we provide direct financial support. We help people with cell phones and hotels. We help people with housing and with getting a bus ticket to be safe. Whatever the unique needs of a survivor is who is referred to us or calls us, we are there. We assist both minors and adults. We conduct massive amounts of community education. In fact, we've trained over 21,000 people since we were formed 10 years ago, and we've assisted over 250 survivors. We do work in partnership. So, like all of you, I mean, I always say it takes a village. So, know that because trafficking is such a diverse issue, can affect people in many different ways. So are the places where people can get help and where you need to look for help. And I'm talking, the justice system, civil and criminal. I'm talking nonprofits. I'm talking businesses. Everyone has a role. And I wanted to end this slide with the question: do you have a local anti-trafficking program? So if you do, you want to let us know that again in the chat. If you have a local anti-trafficking program or a coalition or a task force, go ahead and put that in the chat as well, because one of the things that I promise you're going to want at the end of this program is to know who you can call when, not if, but when you encounter this issue in the workplace. So just some background information. This training is really geared to support the workplace, and this is the backdrop to it. Of course, human trafficking is a human rights violation. The numbers are over 40 million are trafficked globally annually, but still it's hard to know because this is such a hidden phenomenon. The stats are 150 billion annually obtained by traffickers. And also know, we've got several folks from Florida, but know that Florida is third in the nation, with California as one and Texas as two. And I know I saw we do have some folks from Texas on the webinar today. before we show this video, I want to give you a little more information about what we're going to talk about a little more um, with some history. So a while back, our local county commission and Commissioner Minor in particular came to us and said, Robin, what do we need to do more in our local community to end human trafficking? Which for a nonprofit executive director is one of the best questions you can get from an elected, right? So we talked about a number of things, and one of the things I said was, can you please help fund and support the creation of a training that can help people understand human trafficking in the workplace in the broadest sense? What I know about this issue from a lot of other interactions is that very often the business community doesn't know what human trafficking is, just like the rest of the community. They don't know what it looks like. They might have assumptions about it. They might have myths. So what this training is designed to do is to sort of root us in the reality and why it's important. So let's play the video, and we'll talk on the other side.
My name is Rick Miner, and I'm the Leon County Commissioner for District 3. I'd like to thank you for your interest in this training program. It's important that we all know that human trafficking happens right here in Leon County, not just in the larger cities. And our business community can be the eyes and ears to apprehend human traffickers and to help support survivors of trafficking. Human trafficking, whether it is sex trafficking or labor trafficking, rips at the heart of communities, and it affects everyone, men, women, girls, and boys among us, and we all have a duty to help make our community safe and strong. Being informed about human trafficking is not only the right thing to do for your community, it's also the right thing to do for your business's bottom line. Every organization can do its part, from restaurants. Hi, my name is Rick Miner, and I'm the Leon County Commissioner for District 3. I'd like to thank you for your interest in this training program. It's important that we all know that human trafficking happens right here in Leon County, not just in the larger cities. And our business community can be the eyes and ears to apprehend human traffickers and to help support survivors of trafficking. Human trafficking, whether it is sex trafficking or labor trafficking, rips at the heart of communities, and it affects everyone, men, women, girls, and boys. Human traffickers target the most vulnerable among us, and we all have a duty to help make our community safe and strong. Being informed about human trafficking is not only the right thing to do for your community, it's also the right thing to do for your business's bottom line. Every organization can do its part, from restaurants and hotels to the financial and retail sectors to nonprofits and many others. When employees know about this issue and can respond quickly to a possible trafficking situation, they make their workplaces safer for their customers and for their employees. And a safer workplace leads to greater success for your business. The Leon County Commission took the important step of supporting this training opportunity so that all businesses in Leon County can understand and respond to cases of sex trafficking or labor trafficking in our area. And this training is special. Not only is it comprehensive, it is tailored to this area and to the needs and realities that we face here in Leon County every day. A community that is informed and proactively addresses human trafficking is a community that is safer for everyone. Thanks again for doing your part and taking this course.
Well, and thank you all. I'm sorry that was a little probably not as loud as it could be. I don't know how to make it louder, but I hope you heard the gist of that and can make a point of talking to your, let me go back here. There we go. Talking to your local representatives and your elected leadership on how, if you don't have a training that's supported by them, that you can. And this is something I'm happy to talk to you all about how it evolved in our community. But it is invaluable to have the support of elected local representatives as well. So how can human trafficking impact your job and your workplace? First, I want you to think very broadly. As electrical contractors, you go into workspaces all the time. You go into homes all the times, perhaps. You're on job sites. You're seeing other people working. And all of that is true in terms of the job you do. Those of you who are in offices, you too could be seeing trafficking in action, if you will. What does that mean? That means Who's doing repairs at a local office or doing some construction rehab? Who's serving coffee in the local bistro downstairs? Who's delivering your lunch? Who's working in the landscaping around your parking lot? These are all places where trafficking can take place. You might have colleagues who were trafficked at one point in their lives and didn't know it. You might be seeing someone who is currently a victim, and you might see somebody who is in the grooming stage and telling you about a great job that they're about to get, but they can't tell you too much because it's just almost too good to be true. We see in our state that a lot of subcontractors are a kind of weak link, if you will, in keeping strong against trafficking because you'll talk to a hotel. For example, there is a case in this local Sandestin Hilton around us where the hotel said, we don't hire anybody to clean rooms. We hire subcontractors to clean the rooms. And indeed, that's where the housekeeping staff was being trafficked. So you might know people who are traffickers. Very often they are fine, upstanding quotes, members of the community who have a legitimate front business, but it indeed is hiding a trafficking operation. So any of these places are places where you might see both within your workspace and in the job that you do. And also, when you go out into the community afterwards, when you're not thinking of the workplace, when you're somebody who's going to a restaurant or to amusement park or any place in your community, you're going to be smarter after today. So what is trafficking? I didn't say this at the beginning. Excuse me, I have a little frog in my throat. But human trafficking, I'm a lawyer, and I'm not going to give you the legal definition because we would be here for the whole hour going through the ins and outs of those definitions. I'm going to give you the gist, which is trafficking is the exploitation and control of one person by another for profit, power, commercial gain, or benefit. So imagine it is the buying and selling of humans. It is the commodification of a person for sex or any other kind of labor. During this program, and quite often, we refer to someone who is currently in a situation of trafficking, sex or labor trafficking, as a victim and a survivor who is no longer being trafficked. But I want to say that we work really closely with survivors of trafficking, both people we have assisted, as well as people who are national experts and who are people who are formerly, maybe they've been trafficked or they're lived experience experts, another way of saying it. And we stay very grounded on what is the appropriate terminology because it's important. So sometimes people don't want to be referred to as a survivor or a victim. So we always ask and take our lead from those who are affected. Well, last point here, human trafficking doesn't require movement of any kind across any border. Here in our area in Gadsden County, a mother trafficked her child from age 3 to 13 for sex, never left the county. She was trafficking her child in order to support her drug habit. You don't have to cross a border. You don't have to go to another state or county or cross an international border either. One of the things that's really difficult in our state, and I think across the board, is that getting a count of the number of people who commit trafficking crimes and how common this is hard because, and this is one of the reasons, traffickers commit many different crimes. It can be a violent crime like a sexual assault or battery. It can be a crime of financial crime like money laundering or identity theft. I would be hard pressed to imagine any illegal gang activity that does not involve trafficking of some kind, whether it's some sort of making people commit other crimes or forced criminality, or people who are sex trafficking within a gang. We see people who are in drug crimes, committing drug crimes, also having human trafficking, human um, uh, trafficking crimes associated in that criminal portfolio. Traffickers force victims to shoplift and create other kinds of and commit other kinds of retail crimes. We see traffickers not comply with local safety regulations, taxes, paying their taxes, and they often also commit immigration offenses. One of the important things to consider always is that in a legal context, if a victim is over 18, then you do have to show force, fraud, and coercion if you're looking at someone who is sex or labor trafficked. There are some exceptions to that, but generally, if the person is a child, then you do not have to show force or fraud or coercion because the law imputes that a child cannot consent to sex or any of the um, forced commercial acts or commercial sex acts that involve trafficking. So know that this is a very important thing to remember. And this is a case, for example, if you had a 17-year-old male who says to his 16-year-old girlfriend, you know, have sex with my friend so we'll have money to go to Disney, that male is a trafficker, even though he's a minor. And that child, that female, is a victim of trafficking, even though there was no force. He said, please do this. I want money to go to Disney and we can go. So you don't need the force, fraud, or coercion that you need when you're dealing with adults. So let's talk a little bit about what a survivor or victim might look like, or a trafficker. So the first thing to understand is that anybody who is in need, practically, could be preyed upon by a trafficker. That could be men and women, children, adults, any race, ethnicity, religion, citizenship, or socioeconomic status. Very often, the targeting of victims happens because someone has an unmet need. Very often, that unmet need is around money, but it could be other kinds of needs. So, for example, any of these people could be a victim of trafficking, whether that person is an adult or a child, as I mentioned, LGBTQIA populations, farm workers, domestic violence victims. During the pandemic, some of the very first people that we got calls from were people who were fleeing abusive situations in terms of intimate partner violence. And when both partners lost their jobs, the abusive partner said to, in one case, his wife said, now you're going to go out and have sex for money because that's how we're going to keep a roof over our head. And that's when she fled. So keep it in your mind that someone could be a survivor of various kinds of crimes and traumas, and know that they are also, trafficking could be involved. I'm also wondering too, and we probably have information. If we do have information coming in the chat, I want to ask our tech support and Lene, if you want to ask questions that come in, I'm happy to do that. It's hard for me to answer the question or to monitor the chat. So please feel free to jump in on that, by the way. And if you all have any questions, I'd love to hear them. So, as I mentioned, who are the victims? And these are people, again, you might see in the workplace as you go. You might see these folks in terms of your life around town. Know anybody who is vulnerable, especially economic vulnerabilities, could be a victim of trafficking. They may be isolated from help. The trafficker, in our experience, and as I said, we've assisted over 250 survivors. We have seen that that victims often are threatened. They're not usually held behind bars, or you sometimes see trafficking victims depicted with chains or ropes. Really, that is a terrible way to depict what goes on in these situations, because quite often, or more often, all the time with the folks we have assisted, they have been threatened with harm. They've been coerced with these threats or threats of harm. So please know that you're not going to see that kind of physical restraint very often. But the threats and coercion are extremely effective to get somebody to do what a trafficker is asking and demanding. You might see people who are disoriented or malnourished, and often, even as you try to kind of point out maybe and start working with somebody or asking questions, they might actually be defending the trafficker because of something called trauma bonding. in general, and I get these questions a lot, is how can I tell if someone is a victim? Well, know that there's some general characteristics that you can also keep in mind. Um, the lack of agency or free will. Someone can't commit to coming back at a certain time or having a cup of coffee. You might have heard them say something like when they come to work on Monday, I was hoping to call my family, but the boss didn't give me the cell phone, or I couldn't make a call. I haven't talked to my mother in years. They might talk about not getting paid. You might also see someone with lack of ID. One of the interns that we had one time said she was serving a couple at a bar, and she noticed that the woman that was there the guy gave the ID to her to check to make sure she was of age to drink. And then she also overheard her say, "Can I please have my cell phone? I need to make." So it was this idea of agency. Now, I'm not saying that was absolutely trafficking, but it could have been. And know that this ability to get to be free essentially is at what the heart of control is about. Um, I've heard stories that are heartbreaking about one child at a high school who said she was being trafficked. This was a few years back, and she tried to tell people that she was being trafficked, but she was not believed. So know that that often happens. That trafficking survivors really endure things that I'm not sure I could ever endure. And they often work really hard to be safe. Other things you might see them complying with the demand. Very often, a trafficker does threaten to harm the person or their loved ones. Believes they can't leave because they owe a debt. We've heard of people who are labor trafficked who say, "I can't possibly stop working because I signed a contract." Well, that was an illegal contract that you do not have to keep. You might also see a big distrust of authorities of any kind, whether it's DCF or Department of Children and Families, who might be there to help, but are seen as an agent of the state that is going to harm them because that's what happened in their past. That might happen also with their view of law enforcement. And also, one of the biggest things we're seeing now is people don't recognize that they themselves are being trafficked. That this idea of control by one person or another, that's not what's going on with them, because the only thing they see is maybe what they saw when they saw the movie Taken. Maybe they weren't kidnapped. A lot of people think you have to have kidnapping in order for it to be trafficking, and that is not true. So the idea of what is trafficking sometimes can elude even those who are themselves being victimized. So here are some things you might see if you think you may be seeing a victim. You might see these kinds of things, but I'll tell you, I was presenting one time and a survivor was in the as one of the participants, and she said, "I was never any of those things. I would be talking back at you, I'd be cussing, I'd be doing whatever I wanted to do." So no, you're not always going to see someone who's subordinate. You might see someone who isn't, but these are things that are more common. You might see people working with injuries here in North Florida. And by the way, you should know, as we approach hurricane season, that trafficking can increase. Traffickers take advantage of crises like natural disasters. So we had a case here where a man was trafficked from the Midwest into Florida after Hurricane Michael. And he was working on fixing roofs and clearing debris, got a very, very bad infection in his leg, could barely walk, was able to escape. He was working as long and hard as he could because he was, again, being threatened. He couldn't access medical care. So when he got to our community, we were able to see him at STAC. We were able to get him the care he needed so that he could be safe. And he did get all the care he needed. And he was able to heal and move forward in his life. So know that here's some other things in the workplace. You might see people living in the work. I did a training recently at our for our tax collectors offices, and they're in a strip mall where they said there was a massage establishment next door to their tax collector office. What did they see? They saw people living in that establishment in the back. They saw them washing their clothes, hanging them out in the back to dry. They saw them using a hose to bathe. So if you see evidence of someone living in the workplace, say you're going in to do some electrical work, or you're thinking about doing anything in a business or in a private home, you might see people not having access to what would be a normal shower or bathroom. And you might see people, you might have minders on top of someone in the workplace. One of the things that is also really important is to think about, you might be, if you think something's not right with this situation, is this person currently being trafficked, or are they being groomed? Another story I'll tell you is I got a call from a local agency that was doing work with people who had different abilities. It was Disability Rights Agency. And she said, I'm in a group right now with somebody who said she's found the job of her dreams, that she's going to have to go out of town. She's going to have to live in a room with a lot of other people. But she really likes the guy who's telling her about it. It's the kind of work she's wanted to do forever, but I think it's a come on. I think this woman is being groomed. And sure enough, thankfully, at the next support group meeting, the woman came again and she said she decided not to go with this person. But you might see someone in the grooming stage. You might see someone who has been trafficked and is at high risk of being re-trafficked. With this slide, I like to emphasize again that popular media, sometimes if you go and you try to find stock photos of survivors of trafficking or victims, you see waif-like figures with their hands in front of their head, looking very frightened and afraid and unable to do anything. Now, of course, there are times when that is the case, but trafficking survivors are also very resourceful. They do a lot to survive. So know that these strengths and the resilience that they can show in trafficking situations also is going to help them when they get out of the situation and are able to carry on with their lives. So, am I talking too fast, everybody? Am I okay? Are you with me? It's so hard to do these things because I love to see people's faces. But I hope you all are with me. I don't see any questions coming
We
in
have
yet, but
one
oh,
question.
good. Yes.
Um, so someone asked, if I see something, who should I report it to?
Well, I am okay. I'm doing fine. Thank you, Timothy.
Someone,
Um,
yes.
I am going to give you slide information on that very question at the end. So hold that thought and I will give you that information. Great. And also, I want to acknowledge I did see something from Jerry that you're with the Citizens Academy in Greater Houston, and you are finalizing a program to purchase two houses, two homes to work with survivors of human trafficking. Bravo. Thank you for that. And thank you for that question. So a while back, I was making a presentation to a group of hotel owners here locally. And I put this slide was part of what I showed. And at the end of it, this man came up to me very distressed. He said, can you please put that slide up again? And I did. He said, what do you mean to tell me? That business owners can be traffickers? And he was highly offended by that because he was a legitimate business owner. He never thought that that would be the case. But some of the most notorious traffickers have posed as, business owners. They could be in the rural areas of our communities. The quote, find upstanding members of the community. And I will tell you, a big case in Palatka was a labor trafficking case of African American men who were trafficked into the Evans family farm. And that farming community had seen the Evans family farm as a respected farm. But what come to find out, they got reported for dumping waste into the St. Johns River. This was in Palatka, Florida, rural area, northeast part of the state. And when the EPA went in to investigate the environmental violations, they looked around and they said, something's not right here. And what they saw was barbed wire facing in. They saw dilapidated, horrific housing conditions, and come to find out, the Evans family farm was going from homeless shelter to homeless shelter, picking up men who had a substance abuse disorder, and then promising them a job, a place to sleep, and meals, 3 hots and a cot, and lo and behold, they promised to pay them in drugs and alcohol so they would stay vulnerable and addicted. That was a quote legitimate business owner. I don't even say the word pimps these days without saying traffickers. So pimps exploit and force people to have sex for money. So I call them pimp traffickers. Labor subcontractors are highly unregulated in the state of Florida. They are regulated, but the regulations are not strong. And as I said, there are lots of abuses that take place there. You could see labor subcontractors in your offices as who's doing the cleaning, who's doing the maintenance on the facility, who's doing the landscaping. These are all subcontracted positions. Neighbors or friends. Recently, I wrote an article too that family members are when I started this work over 25 years ago, we didn't use the phrases familial trafficking or parental trafficking as much as we do now. And we see it quite often. So those are the pictures of some traffickers. Again, the trafficker is the controller, just like in domestic violence cases. You've got somebody who's controlling the victim. Maybe this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, very gracious and nice to you when they're checking into a hotel, but disrespectful to the victims. I emphasize again, traffickers rarely snatch and grab. And let me just tell you, I can put it in the chat or somebody can, but on our website, which is surviveandthriveadvocacy.org, we have a podcast called Imagine Freedom. The very first interview, I only interview survivors of trafficking. And the very first interview is Liz Kimball. And she talks about how her trafficker, when she was sex trafficked as a child, made an investment in her, bought her things, took her places. Literally, she said it was a money thing. He was investing in me. So if someone is snatched and grabbed, guess what? That investment's not there. And the first thing they're going to try to do is run away. So know that this snatch and grab feature looks good in Hollywood movies and on your latest SVU sometimes, but it is really a very rare thing. Thank you very much for adding that. And if you go on our surviveandthriveadvocacy.org website, you'll see Imagine Freedom. And if you're a podcast person, please, as I say, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love you to listen. So yeah, of the 250 plus people we've helped, none have been snatched and grabbed. They have been groomed. And no, two, if we had another hour, we could talk about online grooming. So just a note for you to remember that sex trafficking and the definition of a commercial sex act under the law definitely includes prostitution as probably everybody thinks of it, but also all of these other aspects of commercial sex. And know that for sex trafficking, you can see elements or parts or evidence of this in any number of different places, any number of different work establishments. So know, and we'll talk more about how that's the case, but you can imagine, victims being forced to commit crimes in retail establishments during when they're being groomed. You're going to see them in salons and getting themselves, as Liz said, looking and acting and having things so that she would be a more attractive piece of property, essentially, to that trafficker. So a lot of times people think there's more sex trafficking than labor trafficking in our world and in our state. I contend that labor trafficking is a lot more common than people know. Mostly because the jobs where people can be trafficked into are a lot more common. Anybody who's in the hotel, hospitality industry, any place where there is low wage labor, where there's a high demand for services, you're going to see the potential and labor trafficking present. And I also, again, if we had another more time, we talk about supply chain issues. The last bullet here is many goods are made with forced labor. Yes. I make a point here locally when I buy coffee, I go to the place where I know that they have sourced their coffee beans. We know they're fair trade, or some other, entity that pays attention to what hands have touched what I'm consuming, what labor, what conditions have the people who've labored been affected by. So if you look at this list, you might see some things that are not surprising, like you would think that human trafficking might take place in housekeeping or janitorial services. In fact, I got a call one time from our State Department of Education here in Tallahassee. Someone was working late and saw the crew and said, something's not right with the people who are cleaning our offices. You know about commercial sex. How about construction? As electrical engineers, you're on many different construction job sites. And I promise you, this could be an issue. Excuse me. Are there any other places where that surprise you here? I mean, you can throw it in the chat, or that you think about that I haven't listed. Would it surprise you to know that someone was trafficked in a church choir? It's one that I haven't listed here, but that was a case in Texas. Anyway, you get the idea. Door-to-door sales. When you see youth coming in and selling magazines or chocolates, notorious examples, if you will, have happened where that's been the case as well. So I noticed on your website, your IEC website, how much you talk about safety. And I will tell you that safety is not a priority when it comes to a trafficking situation. A lot of times traffickers consider people expendable. So you may not see, say, a subcontracted labor crew working at a job site with all of the safety equipment that they could have, with the vests or with the um, maybe masks to help them from pesticide exposure. You might see, again, I mentioned employees living on site. You might hear people talk about wage theft or not being paid. And again, these are things that you can look out for. Know that we know of cases of nurses from the Philippines who've been trafficked here, who speak English beautifully, right? Um, Not everybody who comes and is trafficked into the US is an unskilled worker. In fact, they can be highly skilled at technical jobs, but if you recall, they could be also very vulnerable in some way, economically or because of their immigration status or whatever it is, and they can be exploited. In fact, one of the biggest civil recoveries, I'll just mention this, um, the civil recovery in the Signal case. The Signal case was a case in the Gulf of Mexico after Hurricane Katrina, where the oil rigs had been damaged by the hurricane. And the trafficker brought in highly skilled welders from India to work on those oil rigs. And they were trafficked and they got a huge recovery. So recognizing in the workplace, what is it? How would it look like? And what can you do? First, I want to go through some places where you might see it. And I've alluded to this already, but let's dig a little deeper. First, hotels, both sex and labor could be there, in any kind of hotel. And it might be among any of these people who work in a hotel. And often you can't tell by looking at someone and what they're doing. And we'll talk, I've mentioned some of the signs, but know that it can be among these folks who could also be trafficked. Restaurants. In our little town of Leon County, our little county, I should say, we have over 800 establishments, food establishments. Fourth highest call to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. restaurants are places where you could see trafficking. So if a client is there, if you're putting in, again, if you're doing work in and around a restaurant, whether it's a food truck or a 5-star restaurant, know that it could be happening there. I've done amazing training with banks and so grateful when I'm able to do it, because one case I want to tell you about is a teller after a training. We did a very in-depth training about how financial institutions are so important. Why? Because traffickers have got to move their money around, and they've got to have access to cash, and they have to have access to credit cards and accounts. And so there's a ton of information out of the Department of Treasury that talks about how traffickers can be found. But I will tell you that the training that we did with Capital City Bank, pictured here, actually, resulted in a trafficker being apprehended because a teller reported something that she had seen to her boss after the training and to security. And when they connected with our Florida Department of Law Enforcement Money Laundering Task Force, that agent was so grateful because he said, and he called me later and he said, Robin, we saw something on our end, but we couldn't put the case together until we heard from this teller. So thanks to a training on trafficking and how you can find out, somebody was able to shut down an operation. The retail sector also, I mentioned this already. We think people who are in any kind of situation in retail that deal with loss prevention or retail theft or organized retail crime should be including information about human trafficking. So know too that any kind of shoplifting, especially including gift cards, are ways that traffickers make victims go to these retail establishments and steal. And guess what? Guess who gets in trouble if they're caught? The victim. Very rarely, unfortunately, do we see the in-depth investigations that need to kind of get the person who's on top, the trafficker, apprehended. So we mentioned already offices. These are places, regardless of where you're working. There could also be someone who's trafficked, especially through third parties in these places. I want to give a special mention to the private security forces that are security agencies, if you will, that are hired. The research that I saw, not all these people understand what trafficking is. So if you are one of the managers or in one of the establishments that hires private security, please make sure in your contracts that it includes training on human trafficking. So what do you do? Okay, this is getting to your question from very early on. First, you may not see clear indicators of trafficking and only get a gut feeling. I want you to pay attention to that gut feeling and figure out how you can act on it. We want you to act, but know that trafficking situations can be quite unique. They may look like trafficking and it's not, or you may not have any of the things that I described and it may be trafficking. So let's talk about some of the things you should do. So management, anybody who aren't management but are just part of an organization now, check out and make sure that, just like with any other criminal activity, that you have a protocol that says, here's how we should be trained. Here's our point of contact in our organization for this issue. Here's what we want you to do. One of the things that we see very often is some people say, oh, we do that on a case by case basis. And can I tell you, as a lawyer, I will say that is the worst thing you could possibly do in an organization. So you have the opportunity now to develop a protocol, and we can help with that. So know that learning the signs, which you're doing here today, assessing and looking at the big picture is important, and knowing your law enforcement contacts. So I know Detective Rachel Keller at the Leon County Sheriff's Office is my contact if I know if I suspect something's going on. I challenge you in your local communities to know who your key law enforcement contacts are as well. So what should you do? You're on the job, you're in an office, you're at a job site, you're in a classroom. right? You've just gone to the restroom and you saw somebody cleaning and you're not sure if something's going on there. Or you see something in the atrium of an establishment you're in. What should you do? So the first thing we say, if it's an emergency situation, call 911, right? So, and we don't want you to confront the trafficker or the victim directly. It can be very dangerous. And what we've also understand clearly is that that could put the victim in even more danger. You can't go up there and say, "Oh, I see what's going on here. You stop it, or you come with me. Something's not right here." We really instead want you to do, that assessment, that totality thinking, taking down details to assist management. Here are other things you can do. Taking down key information about license tags, the people involved, both someone you suspect as a trafficker and as a victim. Surreptitiously taking a picture would be very helpful before you call law enforcement. So, so please know these are things you can do right away. This is the slide I wanted to give to you. Who do you contact? So, again, if it's an emergency situation, call 911. Um, I had someone say something didn't look right. This guy was taking this young girl down the street and she was screaming. Now, was that a sullen or a mad teenager who was, being taken by her dad to the doctors or something? I don't know. But, or was it a situation that was something else? So if it's an emergent situation, definitely 911. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is a 24/7 resource for all of us around the country. You can go online as well and click on the state you're in and see which agencies have been vetted by them to provide services. STAC, our organization is a referral source for the hotline. You can call and you could provide a tip, or you can also call to just say, "Hey, something's going on here. I don't know what it is. Could this be trafficking? What should I do?" So it can be a chat. You can chat, you can talk. Okay. So here's your resource for that person, Lene, who at the very beginning said, "How do I respond?" So put this in your phone now. And I will tell you, I did a training with some emergency EMTs, and they put our local number in, this 597-2080 number in, and within probably a couple months they were taking somebody to the hospital who's disclosed that they were sex trafficked, um, and the EMT called us from the ambulance to help this person. So that's our number. We're only in the North Florida area, but get that number please, for who your local service provider is, as well as the second number here, a suspected child or vulnerable adult who is trafficked. That's a mandatory call for those of us in Florida to our DCF hotline. Do you have another question?
Not yet. There's no more
Okay.
questions in the chat, but I did have a question.
Yes.
I know that we talked a little bit about traffickers and how they exploit the online platforms, but I just want to know, we hear about online all the time, but can you tell us more about some of the emerging threats in trafficking? And just as a community, how do we stay aware and stay vigilant, and be proactive in trying to prevent this?
Thank you. That's a great question. And by the way, you're just amazing, wonderful asset to your organization. I have to say, it's been a joy to work with you on this, um, and to work with you also through the Zoe's Hands of Hope project. So thank you, Lainey. So the online presence, it is so vast and so deep. I will tell you that our DCF told us recently that there are trafficking victims out there who are never in the same room as their trafficker. So how that happens locally, and I'm going to go back to the last slide just so we don't, so you can think about this for a sec. There is how do I want to say, there's this whole world where traffickers groom people through various ways. It can be through luring them to another part of the country or the world for a job that looks like a job of their dreams. It could look totally legit, and then you leave your area and go to that place and all bets are off when you get there. you can have someone doing that kind of recruiting. We also see that traffickers go online, especially with youth, through every single sort of messaging platform there can be, including DMs through gaming platforms where they pose as, you know, kids the same age. They pose as another 16-year-old, and then they flatter, whether male or female, and ask for pictures. And what we see increasingly is sometimes youth do send pictures that are compromising, that may be nudes or partial nudes. And then the trafficker threatens them and says, unless you do what I say, I'm sending all these pictures to your school, to your family, to your faith community, to anybody, because you've just given me some, you know, the pictures that are so revealing and are so potentially shaming. So that's another way it takes place, through that kind of sextortion, they call it. And and that's incredibly difficult often to detect, but it starts extremely innocently with somebody observing somebody online, and youth unwittingly friending someone they shouldn't, disclosing personal information, talking about their sisters. I will tell you that one of my colleagues said her daughter came to her, and she said, I was just playing a game online, and somebody was playing, and they started asking me, did I have any sisters? You know? So it's that kind of gaining of personal information that you really have to be wary of. And as a parent or as a grandparent or anybody who's around youth, please, monitor your child's online activity, and also know that really they're getting better and better at all of this. So that's just a couple of examples about how the online activity happens. Um, so, just getting on, I hope with what you've seen today that I can, um, you know, give you these questions and make you think about, maybe, or help you think about, huh, maybe this could be trafficking. Is it an emergency? Are there red flags? Do you have someone you can talk to? In our community, they could call STAC, but you might have someone in your workplace that you want to have as a point of contact in your agency or in your organization, or within the IEC, who would be your trafficking points of contact. Um, do you know where to refer for assistance? So the hotline can connect you to agencies and places all over the nation where someone could be connected to get help. And I will do a disclaimer too and say the hotline is imperfect. It is run by people who try their best. But like if you're in Georgia, Georgia has a hotline that's pretty amazing. There are always, and just Google and try to find your local assistance and where you can go to get a policy or protocol developed, or maybe amended for your workplaces. The other thing I want to help you think about is the needs that survivors have, and that how you in the private sector, or anyone who's working with survivors of trafficking, know that survivors need a whole range of of supports and help. And it could mean, for example, um, a life or death situation, really, for someone to get a good job, have a house that's safe, have access to these things, medical care and legal assistance. So know that I always say anybody who's helping people get any of these things in your local community, you're doing anti-trafficking work, because you're helping someone address a vulnerability, and someone to not be re-trafficked or trafficked in the first place. So this is just some of the things that we see as priorities in our area, that we really are constantly helping people access. And also, trauma informed as well as trauma counseling is really important to heal from some of the worst things that can happen to a human, happen to survivors of trafficking. In terms of the business community and the financial sector, for example, I always like to mention that traffickers do a lot of dastardly, horrible things One of the things they do is they make people open up bank accounts and credit cards, and then they take them from them. And when somebody is out of the situation, their credit is shot, their identity has been stolen, they can't access employment, they can't even access an apartment because of what's been going on. So these are things that we don't always think about. Sometimes you just think, oh, they're out of the situation, life's going to get better, and it is a very long road. And especially, and I noticed all of and we've talked about it before, the wonderful partners that are part of the IEC, whether it's Home Depot or any of the manufacturers. These are places where I wanted to really put a plug in, for people to understand how important it is to employ survivors. So to conclude, and I think we're in pretty good shape on this, just want to make sure, and I hope the answers are yes, that you feel better able to recognize the signs of labor and sex trafficking, that you know how to better respond and react to situations, and that you know of some resources, definitely the hotline, and maybe you'll help find some more in your local community to prevent and fortify against trafficking. I'd also like, Jasmine, if you could, to put up the stacpro.org website. So you might have noticed we call this training Stack Pro, and it started out as an online only course. And what we found was people like to do it like this and they like to do it in person, but you can still take the course online and register. You shouldn't do it now because you've had it, right? But what you can do is you can register and then be able to have access to lots of other videos and supportive materials that will help you even more with these things. So here's the information if you are a lawyer. We've had this program for an hour now. This is the course level. Intermediate course number is there, and you can see my contact info as well. Please feel free to reach out. I would love to interact with all of you. And again, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be with you today. And is there anything else? Any other questions? And again, thank you all.
I don't see any other questions. I just want to thank you so much, Robin, for being with us. I also wanted to just give everyone a little bit of context about the Zoe's Hands of Hope project that we mentioned. So, trafficking really hit our IEC community and our Rotary community very close to home. In our IEC community, we had the daughter of one of our instructors, who was a victim that did not survive, as well as our local Rotary Satellite Club president, her niece, in the same year. We wanted to do work to support our communities that we serve always. And we met Robin through this work that we are trying to do in the human trafficking space to just help eradicate this horrific crime. Jasmine is going to put some things into the chat right now. There's an article if you want to learn more about Zoe's Hands of Hope. In there, you can just click on that link. And I just want to thank everyone for being here and participating. I hope that you learned something that you can use in your workplace or in the community where you live. Thanks for joining us.